Welcome to The Big Break Show, a podcast where we discuss short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, life, mindset, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Rafa and Jesse Vasquez.
What's up, fam? Welcome to another episode of The Big Break. This is episode number 9, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Jesse Vasquez. What's up, brother? What's good?
What's going on, man? How you doing? Episode number 9. Look at that. We're almost in the double digits.
Crazy, dude. I know. I'm excited. Can't believe it. I know. Hopefully people are finding value from our podcast because I think they're fun.
Say the value is definitely today. We're going to learn about Turo. For those of you who don't know, the sharing economy, not just Airbnb, it also goes into vehicles. And we have President Leo, who has his own fleet of vehicles, who helped Rafa pick up some vehicles. And we're going to talk about how he's able to scale his business, make some pretty awesome cash flow with old cars, not even necessarily super old, but in the 2000s, and really scale a business.
Yeah, you know, he's originally from Atlanta, Georgia. And when I met him, I actually met him at Clubhouse and he was dropping all this knowledge. And I was like, oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about, right? This dude started his car sharing journey, 8 years ago? And now he's teaching it. For Turo. He's teaching people how to do it themselves. He's in 3 different states. I mean, guys, this guy, like the value that was dropped today, it just sucks that we had to cut it short because we could have gone for hours. I mean, he helped me source 5 vehicles that are being rented right now. And I mean, I'm just excited. You know, this was a really good conversation. So hopefully everybody here finds value.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think everybody that's listening now will have a better understanding what the Turo market is and how to generate some money for it. So take a listen.
Yeah, no, not only that, he goes into how to get started and he gives like really creative ways. And I was like, oh, I never even thought about that, right? Because most people think, hey, I'm going to go buy a car at the dealership and get started that way. This guy tells you like really creative ways to get started. So without further ado, guys, hope you enjoy the show. So Leo, man, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you coming on, man. Super excited. So before we get started, I'd like for you to tell the listeners a little bit about you, who you are, kind of, you know, for somebody who's never heard of you and listens to the podcast and goes, who's this President Leo guy? Like, where did you come from? What's your background? Like, give us the story.
So for everybody, I go by the moniker President Leo because I feel like I'm a man of the people, right? I'm always trying to invest in my communities. I feel like the elite invest in their communities, and I like to consider myself one of those elite individuals. And so for myself, I'm an automotive investor. I've been so for about a decade now. And then what I realized shortly after getting into the automotive industry that I didn't want to just be the traditional fix and flipper. And so that led me to expediting vehicles, which I currently still do, mainly from America to the West African region. But I can expedite anywhere. Then I continued my broker services where I was just buying and selling for profit to dealers. So it was from dealer to dealer type of situations. But then about 8 years ago, right, I stumbled across this deal. I remember like it was yesterday, right? So I was in the bank, and literally the banker there was telling me about one of his younger nephews who had got into this thing called relay rides, which is now Turo, and how he was making decent money for his age in that space right there. And so I quickly went home, researched it, found out it was good. So then I hopped inside of that. So I've been doing car share for about 8 years now. Started out with, like I said, Relay Ride, which is now Turo. I've since expanded to other platforms such as Hire Car, Get Around, and also do my private rentals as well. I'm now operating across 3 markets. My major market being Atlanta, my secondary market being Hawaii, and I have a few cars out there in the Los Angeles area as well that I rent out to gig economy workers. So that whole business right there has been real critical for me because I had to learn a lot of these things on my own, right? And so now we're at this information age where, you know, access to information is at an all-time high, and I'm really able to package all of my experiences right into a digital product that many people get to see day in and day out to help them further their business. So that's a little bit about me, at least in the automotive field. I aspire to continue to be in this field and continue to build my brand and continue to grow my knowledge here.
Awesome, dude. I appreciate that. So 2 things you said that I'm kind of curious about. I wanted to ask you how you got into the car sharing, but you kind of explained that. So there's how does that what made you want to go, like, how did that happen? What was the process of you going, hey, I want to jump into this field and give it a shot? Because for a lot of people to try a new business or to become an entrepreneur, it's difficult for them, right? It's like either they're scared or they're afraid of what might not happen. They don't think of what could happen, right? What's the positive side of this, rather than, well, if I go into this car sharing thing, maybe someone crashes my car, or maybe someone steals my car, or maybe I lose money and I'm stuck back in my job, or I have to go find another job. Like, what was your entire, like, I'm curious, like, what was your mindset behind saying, hey, I want to give this thing a shot, right? Because you said it came from a conversation from someone at the bank. So I'm really curious about this now.
For sure. So for all entrepreneurs, I'm sure the same is for yourself and Jesse as well, is that as entrepreneurs, right, we're always focusing on cash flow, right? And how can we cash flow more? How can we start different ventures of cash flowing? And so for me, that's what it was all about. What I noticed is that, you know, the day-to-day struggle of me fixing and flipping cars was not satisfying to my entrepreneurial spirit. And so when I'm not being satisfied, it puts me in a situation where now my brain starts to wonder, right? Have some good thoughts, have some bad thoughts. But with that whole situation right there, it was critical for me because of where I was in my life. You know, everything that I was doing was not on the up and up. And so if I really wanted to give this entrepreneurial thing a shot, right, genuinely wanted this thing to impact my life, I knew that I had to go all in, right? But I was searching. I didn't know where I was going to go all in at, right? And so that gives a little context to what I was talking about earlier with the banker, because literally I'm a fix and flip guy. I mean, I'm just fixing the cars, flipping them as I can, not really doing it with much business structure at the time. But then I started structuring my business, not knowing what I was going to do in automotives, but knowing that I needed to take these specific steps in order to start really taking myself seriously. So what was that? That was setting up the entity. That was then looking for the banking structure. So as I'm going in to set up a bank account now, that's when because naturally when I walked in, the banker would ask you, when you're setting up a business bank account, like, what do you do? Like, what is your business? Right. And so for me, I'm kind of fabricating, just to be honest with you, right? I'm not where I want to be in life. And I'm just fabricating, just having conversation and just trying to make it look good. Right. And so then the conversation just immediately led into him introducing me into that car share world. Now, while he didn't have any experience or anything to give me, he did alert me to the fact that this thing was going on and it was making money. But what was weird for me is that I hadn't seen any commercials regarding the deal, right? And so once I found out about it, I said, well, let me slap two cars up and let me just see what it does, right? I have nothing to lose at this point, right? And so when I put the cars up, immediately, both of them, 30-day rentals. And I'm like, wait a minute, these cars just got rented out for 30 days. This is a platform that I've never heard about, right? I mean, imagine never hearing about Airbnb, right? And then you slap up a house and then all of a sudden it's gone for the entire month, right? That's a game changer. And so what it really spoke to me is that, man, this space has real upside, because if they're getting this kind of traction in my area without advertising, without me seeing that advertising, right, then I can just imagine what the future would hold for this industry. And so I decided to double down. So 2 cars turned into 6 cars, 6 cars turned into 12 cars. Next thing I know, within a couple of months, I was up to about 20 cars that I was operating, and each one of them getting rented out. On a daily basis.
Man, that's awesome. One of the things you said, Leo, you went all in on something. And I think that a lot of times people realize, like, if you're good at something, you already said you were good at flipping cars. Like, that was something you're already attached to, you're already doing. But when you go all in on something, it changes. Like, if you're really good at one thing, and this is something I tell my kids too, I'm like, if you get good at one thing and then you just go all in on that, you can make a legitimate business out of it. And one of the other things that you're talking about too is, the Turo business. When I look at it, like, we talk about Airbnb all the time, and I always talk about how Airbnb is like, I feel like we're in the second or third inning of Airbnb. It's still pretty new, even after 10 years, right? Turo industry is like, dude, the umpires are out in the field right now talking about the game before it's even getting started. Like, that's how I feel. That's how I
love
feel.
that. Yeah.
I feel like they're just getting ready to get the players out there. Like, literally, they're just walking the grounds. Groundskeepers are out there sweeping the field. You know what I mean? Like, that's where we're at in the Turo business. And I think that's where everybody really needs to realize that, there's a lot of opportunity here. Not only that, but like, dude, I got a Tesla, and the Tesla's paid for. I have people paying for it. I drive it during the week. You could do stuff like that. So I think one of the questions that I have for you, and a lot of people ask this question to me, like with Airbnb, Rafa, we can look at a market and we can run numbers on it and be like, okay, cool. I know this is going to make X amount of money. I can base the next 6 months or a year what the trajectory is. How do I do that with Turo? Like, how do you go into a market and tell if that car is going to work or not? Or what if, say, somebody's in a rural market? Like, how do you go about breaking that down, Leo?
Okay, so this is real interesting, and I love that analogy that you use, Jesse, because I want to take that a step further, right? And saying that we're still in the draft. Like, we haven't even made it to game day yet, right? We're still trying to draft players for this league, right? So the reason why I'm saying that is because, there are a lot of hosts out here, there are a lot of operators out here, right? But they usually don't last more than a year. And the reason why is because everyone's kind of getting inside of this business, and it's all based on the glitz and the glam that they've seen around this whole industry, right? So whether it's an ad on Instagram with a guy in the latest Rolls Royce or something, right? Or whether it's hearing that a friend is now driving this Corvette and he doesn't have to make any payments, right? We're allowing our business, right, our business mind to be led by what we're seeing, right? What is aesthetically pleasing to us. And I think that that's the issue. Because what happens is that now we start to stray away from the details of the business because it starts to get this stereotype that is anyone can do it, right? But anyone can do it, but it has to be anyone has to have the specialized knowledge in order to be effective in this space, which leads to a lot of people saying, hey, after a year, I didn't make any real money, or they start lowering their expectations. Well, I didn't really want to make any money. I just want to drive my dream car for free, right? No, that doesn't make sense. As an entrepreneur, right, like I spoke about at the beginning, our whole deal is learning how to cash flow, whether actively, whether passively, whatever capacity that is, we're trying to cash flow, right? Because literally, the only thing that separates us, right, from the armed forces is that they lay their lives on the line, and we lay our salaries on the line. We lay our well-being on the line in order to chase our dreams, right? And so I feel like if you understand that, now you can start moving towards defining what kind of market you want to be in. Because at that particular point, you've made up your mind to be intentional in this business right here. When you're intentional, you can go in any market. And so what I really quickly noticed is that, operating in Atlanta is completely different than operating in Hawaii. And the way that I was able to start to come to those conclusions is because I had to start laying it out on paper. Okay, what types of vehicles are being rented the most? Okay, why are they being rented? And so in order for me to understand why they're being rented, then I started to have to realize the demographics of the area, right? And so when I'm looking to go into a market, I mean, we're literally breaking it down. We're real surgical with it. So the first thing we want to know how many people are in the average household. How much is the average household bringing in, okay? Now we're going to research the airport, see what travel looks like. Is travel increasing or decreasing on a year-by-year basis, okay? And of course, COVID kind of threw a whole doozy inside of the deal right there, but it's still valuable information that we had to take in, okay? Now we start peeling it back towards, what are these travelers coming in town for, right? This is information that's made available on the internet. Okay, so now we start to understand why people are coming in town. Okay, how many people are coming in town? Now we start understanding the demographic of the people that are already located there. What is their salary? What is their mean income, right? That's going to start to give us an outlook on what kind of inventory we should be bringing in, right? And so if I'm in Biloxi, Mississippi, right, and the average household income is 40 grand, why am I bringing Teslas and Bentleys and things of that nature to that particular area? Not to say that it would never get rented out, right? But we're looking at the utilization, right? And so what we really want to do is to make sure that our utilization is high as possible, right? So we really are striving to have it anywhere between that 85 and 95% range right there. Because what happens is that the less that we have the inventory, the more that we're able to cash flow, and we're able to cash flow in longer term rentals, which is very, very critical to us because it cuts down our cost of turning these vehicles over. All right, so let's go back to some of the other things that we have to consider when moving into another market. So now that we've understood the demographics, what they make, why travelers are coming, how often are the travelers coming, where are these travelers usually going to, now we need to understand where are we operating out of, right? And so, let's just say, for instance, we're in California, right? We've calculated everything coming in and out of LAX and all these other good deals that I've mentioned. Now we have to dial it even further and understand exactly where are we located at, okay? So let's just say we're in Irvine, California, right? So now we're starting to realize, okay, what is in that area? Is it an industrial area? Is there a lot of shopping? What's the foot traffic like in this area? Once again, all this information that can be found on the internet. What are some of the event spaces that are there, right? So we're looking at things like Hollywood Casino in their area. We're looking at SoFi Stadium. Okay, what's coming to SoFi Stadium? What's coming to the casino, right? That's going to really start to allow us to really understand what type of vehicles that we want. And so now in a market like Irvine, California, now we're able to really understand exactly where we want to take the business. So we understand that we have a couple of consumers there, right? We have our consumers that are traveling for leisure activity, and we have our consumers that are traveling for more of a business deal, right? In order to get these people around in this city. So now we need to understand, okay, well, according to our business model, what type of vehicles do we want to get, right? What type of capital do we want to deploy inside of this business, right? And so understanding these things, right, and getting very, very intentional all the way down from the type of consumer that you have, all the way down to the type of vehicle you will have, is what really, really packs value inside of this business and almost guarantees that you'll see success in there, right? Because everything that you're being led to make every decision that you're making inside of this industry right here.
Yeah. You know, we talked about this before. Looking at the economic structure of a city is a huge thing. Like especially with the sharing economy. Like you have to know what those things are. You have to know basic analytics. Like, you know, we all get that what's that mailer that people get at the end of the year? You got to fill it out, and it talks about how much money you make, how many people in your family. You know what I'm talking about, you guys? Maybe not.
Census thing, right?
Census thing. There you go. So that breaks down. You can look that up. That's all public data. You can look and see exactly how many people live in there. So like say I'm in a rural place, Leo, like let's just say like where I'm at, Modesto, California. Are you looking at hotel in Airbnb stuff as well, or like what the occupancy looks like? Because if on paper, the city that I'm in looks like, I mean, there's only 100,000 people here, but there's a huge business as far as people coming in. I live in an agricultural city where there's a lot of people that are coming from out of state, out of the country there's Gallo Winery, which is a big, huge winery here. So do you look at stuff like that? Does that change any factors when you're looking at, you know, dropping some cars in those markets? Because on paper, again, it doesn't look like a city that makes very much. I think the average person here, couple, makes like 48,000 or something like that, which is, I think, the national average. So how does that even break? Like, how would you determine? Would you determine it just based off the census, like the census capabilities, what the numbers are, what people make, or is it more of a demand in travelers? Or, you know, are you deep diving into that too?
So that's a good question. So I definitely would take into consideration a lot of the things that you said. One thing that I haven't done, which you just mentioned, that I may add to our research, is really researching the short-term rentals in the area right there. But we do look at the hotels, the traditional hotels, right? Because I figure, at least in my mind, wherever a hotel is, I'm sure there's a short-term rental somewhere close by, right? And so I will look at that. I do look at the venues, all venues that are there. You know, no matter the size of the city, every place has a convention center or some kind of place where people of that town congregate at. So I will look there, see what type of events are happening, what type of people it brings into that town. But see, now here's the key difference between the short-term rental as far as the housing and things, and the short-term rental as far as the cars, right? And that difference is that short-term rental housing is more of a hospitality type of deal, right? But with the short-term rental transportation side, I mean, it's a necessity, right? People and things must get from point A to point B, right? And so I don't care if you're living in, you know, North Pole, Alaska, you got to be able to move around, right? But then we have to take into consideration, like what you said, Modesto, you know, not being the hugest area as far as population is concerned. Okay, so what are some creative ways in which we can capitalize in a town where population isn't as high as some of the surrounding metro areas? And so we're going to start to really dive in to look at things like, okay, let's start looking at some of the local mechanic shops, some of the local auto detail shops, right? Some of the local maintenance facilities, because at the same time, like I just mentioned earlier, right? Transportation is a necessity. It's a necessity. It's a must, right? The chair I'm sitting in, the chair you're sitting in, the cameras, everything got here by some form of wheels, okay? And so if we're looking at that, now we start to look at these different businesses and see, we realize that the car share economy, our car rental economy, is a add-on to that business, right? So if someone's car goes down and they got to take it to the mechanic, they still going to need a ride, right? And so how do we position ourselves with mechanics and body repair guys and maintenance guys in order to extract value? Having them recognize that what we're providing is a value add to their business, right? So are we going to start to, because the consumers is thinking about money, right? In a smaller town where you could generally assume that income is smaller, what happens? That means that the ability to spend on extra things now becomes a little more minimized, right? And so how does that look? How does that help us? Well, I understand that, okay, if an individual is looking to drop a car off because they just got to get this, let's just say they got to get a radiator put inside of this vehicle. They just got to, right? Would they want to go to a shop where they put the radiator in, where they would drop their car off to have that repairs done and then catch what? I mean, and Ubers in California are expensive. It doesn't matter where you are, right? So we're catching a $60 Uber, up the street to the next town in order to get a rental car from Avis or to meet this Turo host. Or can we put ourselves in a situation where we've now set vehicles down in that same location right there to where we can use that, or the mechanic can use that as an advertising point, right? Bring your cars to us, and we have rentals on site. And so what a consumer would be thinking is, well, $60 that I was going to spend in order to travel, or $40 I'm going to spend towards travel, I can now turn around and put inside of this vehicle, right? And it's not just a one-way commute, because then they have to drop that rental off and then catch another Uber back to where they're going. Other than that, you have to inconvenience one of your family members or friends or some deal, right? And so if we're living in a world of convenience, right? Convenience pays. Convenience pays. No matter what capacity convenience is in, it pays whenever it is present, because that's just how we are as people. We want to take the path of least resistance. And so if we have that in those particular areas right there, and we present ourselves as a packaged company that knows what they're doing and adds value, now you're solving two issues, right? You're solving, how do I rent my vehicle out in a small time? And also you're solving, where in the world am I going to keep my vehicles as I continue to try to grow out this fleet? You have all of that in that one-stop shop by providing solutions to people that are going to have problems.
Okay, so I got to tell you, because I like what you said about the difference between the short-term rentals and the cars, right? Short-term rentals, people can pick and choose if they really want to stay in a very luxurious house or a very, inexpensive house. But with cars, it doesn't matter, because it's more of a necessity. As you were saying, you need it to get from point A to point B. It's not like you're going to walk 7 miles, right? Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about that before, because one of the questions I had asked you in the past was, how do you stand out in the market, in the car market, right? Mm-hmm. Because I know, like, for example, for me, for my short-term rentals, I provide amenities for specific type of customers that come into my place. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the car industry, and I'm new, right? I just started. I got some cars off you. And so in the car rental business, it's not what the amenities I provide. It's more of the car that I have for that type of consumer, correct? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that, and the difference here is, like, because I've heard people, like, even my neighbor, he saw that I was buying all these cars, and he's like, hey, he had a car, he was about to sell it. And I'm like, bro, don't sell it. Put it up on Turo. I go, if not, I'll buy it off of you. And he's like, wait, you'll buy it off of me? I'm like, yeah, but I want you to try this out. You're going to make some money off of it. It's super passive. It's super easy. All you got to do is wait for someone sometimes and get it washed, and it goes back out really fast. And he's like, okay, let me try this out. And so I just talked to him last night. He's been doing it for about a month and a half. He's like, bro, we're about break even, but we've replaced the windshield. It was broken prior. We fixed 2 dents on it. We got all the brakes redone. We got the tires, and the car's practically brand new again. We might actually end up keeping it now that it's in tip-top shape. But it's doing so good that we want to keep renting it out. And I'm like, I told you guys. And he goes, do you think that this will do better? And I go, well, they actually have, like, those old, like, I don't know, it's a Jeep, but I don't know the type of Jeep. And he goes, you think that? I go, listen, right now, because it's a little bit slow, right? It's January. I go, but wait for this car in the summer months here, close to Disneyland. That car's going to be going for like $80 a day. You're going to be making so much money off that car. I go, just hold on to it. Because he's thinking, like, I still kind of wanted to sell it, but now I want to kind of keep it. And I want to use it again. And I'm like, dude, just let it generate revenue for you now, right? And it goes back to the point I was getting at, is because that specific car is going to serve a specific customer here during that time zone, right? He doesn't need to put, because the reason I brought this up was because he goes, do you provide like amenities, like, where I'm thinking I'm providing a skateboard. or providing like a charger or something inside of it, like maybe like a rollaway bed. And I'm like, dude, you don't need to do any of that. I go, the customer that's going to book your vehicle is the customer who needs that type of vehicle. For example, I'm going to Milwaukee this weekend. I'm going with 8 people. I'm not going to rent a 4-seater Hyundai Elantra. I'm going to rent an 8-seater Chevy Suburban. Right? And it doesn't matter if it goes with chargers or not. It's because of the type of vehicle that I need. Right?
And I agree with that. I agree with that completely. So there's two things too, right? Is what you said. And then there's the fact that, you know, if you're operating on these platforms, they're not providing those extra amenities, any type of insurance protection, right? So if you do put a skateboard out there, or, you know, like in Hawaii, surfboards, I thought about doing that. But then I had to realize, like, if I don't have protection for those things, then somebody takes it and breaks my board or breaks the skateboard or something like that, then you pretty much are just sustaining that loss on your own, right? And so I try to stay away from adding those additional things as far as that. But what I do like to do is put my vehicles in a situation where I start to add the cool factors, right? Because the cool factors add money. And so, for instance, I have this 2007 Lexus IS250, right? But it isn't an ordinary IS250. Why? But adding that cool factor, right? So I'm adding the tinted windows. I'm adding the blacked out lights. I'm adding the black rims, right? These things start adding value because they start to appeal more to consumers. Why? Because they just pop and they stand out, right? And so, yes, you're adding more value to the car. No, you don't have protection on it, but the likelihood of somebody breaking your, you know, scraping up your tints or breaking your blacked out tail light and stuff like that becomes slim to none. The beauty of that as well is that you wouldn't believe it, right? But I can still get $80 a day for this 2007 Lexus IS250, right? I can still get $80 a day. I've seen it during like Christmas time, literally get $95 a day and be rented out. Why? Because it just appeals to a lot of people. Then here's a secret gem that a lot of people don't know, right? Based on your age on these platforms, especially Turo. Well, let me just say Turo in particular. It determines what vehicles you have access to rent, right? And so a lot of people don't know that, but a 20-year-old, 21-year-old can't go out and rent your brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee. The app won't allow it because of the value of that vehicle exceeds the risk that the insurance company is willing to take on behalf of the platform right there. So what happens? Well, if I can't get the Jeep Grand Cherokee, let me find something that still looks as cool that I can actually apply for, right? And then there may be my 2007 Lexus with the blacked out lights and all of that. And you're like, hey, you know what? It's older, but it's not so bad, right? Plus, me adding these things to that Lexus right there now gives it a newer look, right? So it doesn't really look like an 07 anymore, right? Probably looks like a 2010, 2012. And so, you know, just doing those little things like that really, really help you add value to that. And also, you mentioned something very, very important, Rafa, because you talked about the slow months, right? And so one of the other things that we do in terms of research is that we look at it like this, okay? We look at it just as real estate. We try to mimic, we try to mimic as much as we can behind real estate because it draws so many parallels. And so what we hear oftentimes in commercial real estate, right, is Class A assets, Class B assets, Class C assets, right? Especially in the multifamily. Let's take apartments, for instance, right? The multifamily space, okay? So we notice that one of the more thriving parts of that, right, is going to be the Class B assets. Why? Because people are constantly moving to Class A, and some people are dropping down to Class C. Class A is sometimes not doing so well financially. They drop down to Class B, and so that Class B becomes a revolving door, right, that a lot of people need to go through. So how do we put this in terms of cars? Okay. If we get a vehicle that's on the higher end, let's say a Class A asset, right? How often can we get people to utilize that vehicle? Well, it's going to be at times where disposable income peaks. When does disposable income peaks? It peaks during tax season, right? It peaks during the summertime because people have saved up the whole time to start enjoying their summer times, right? But then we scale it back and we look at things like Class B, Class C assets and realize, when do they peak? They're usually peaking year round, right? Because those people, right, it's no longer a luxury. Now it's out of necessity, right? If I choose to drive a McLaren, it's out of luxury. It's out of me leisurely doing that, right? But if I'm looking to get myself from point A to point B because I need to work, I need to drop the kids off at school and all these deals, I'm going to settle for those Class B, Class C, which is going to drive my utilization up. Right. And the more utilization we have, right, the less turnover that we have. Right. So we're not seeing and cleaning these vehicles every other day and stuff like that, like we would traditionally see if someone were to rent out a Rolls Royce, which might only be going for a day or 2 days at the most, unless you have some kind of special accommodations for a particular consumer.
Dude, okay, so man, I love this conversation, and you kind of know my story, right? Because when I first started, I was like, I actually heard you talking about it, and I've been in the short-term rental world, like, I actually rented a car a long time ago, but this time when I actually wanted to get started, I went out and I went to the dealership and I bought that Audi, the A5. And I had already done my research. I was already going in for an A3, which I ended up buying anyway, but I got really hyped on this A5 and I'm like, man, this is a beautiful car. Like this thing's going to kill. Like a worst case scenario, I get to drive a cool car for free. Stupid mistake, right? The car didn't rent for like almost a month and a half because kids couldn't rent it. And the only people that wanted to rent that car were young kids and they couldn't. And then the app put a specific price range on it. So I couldn't go lower than a specific price range. And then they had to pay a deposit to drive it. And I'm like, dude, they're making this impossible. But then comes summer, literally a month and a half later, summer hits. And that car made me, I think, something like $1,400 in like a month and a half or something. And I was like, wow, okay, here we go, right? During the summer months, like I literally didn't have a car because all my cars were rented, right? Like I don't even own a personal car. They're all rentals. And when they're available, I drive them. You know, so this car, this Audi, and I was like, I was really upset when I first got it. I'm thinking like, man, like I'm going to end up losing money on this car. And you know what? There has been months where I had to pay for the car payment, but the months that made me all that money has covered it. So technically, if I average out the money that I've made for it, I haven't paid a single car payment on that vehicle. I don't know. I think right now, maybe I might be positive a little bit, or I might be break even. But regardless of the fact is now, because it's back to slow season. Well, it was slow season for a little bit, like November in SoCal is a little bit of slow season. And the car rented, I think 3-4 times. The point I'm making is because of that higher end luxury feel of the car, right? Because it's an A5 Sportsback. The app made it this like luxurious car. So it put all these restrictions on it. So it made it a little bit more difficult. But on the other end, my Dodge Durango, I told you, right? That thing's big. That like I never see that vehicle. Like it comes in, it goes. It comes in, it goes. Like it's always out. You know what I mean? And so now that I got the other cars from you, you know, we're sitting at this spot where now I'm starting a whole separate business in the sharing industry aside from my short-term rentals. And it's going to become this thing where like it's another completely cash generating asset from vehicles. And the vehicles are lower end vehicles that I don't have to worry about because they're peaking all season, like you said. And so the next point I wanted to bring up is because you brought something up and I want people to kind of listen to this. The biggest question I get and the biggest question I always had was the insurance side of things, right? We like now I know how the Turo Insurance works. And I appreciated the fact that you said that, you know, don't put extra amenities in there because they're not covered by insurance. And we know that an insurance claim on a car could be huge, right? Like you're talking if somebody steals your vehicle or if somebody crashes it or even just a little ding on the bumper, like it's a couple $1,000 for something like that, right? So can you give a couple tips on insurance for somebody who wants to get started? Let's just say they have a car sitting around in their backyard and they want to do what I did and just put it up and use it on their days off or something. What's something that you can give them for like an insurance or give me another insurance tip? Because like I'm always looking at, I know I don't want to answer your question because I know what you're going to say, the 60-40 thing, but like aside from that, like, you know, what do you recommend? What are your thoughts on insurance?
So yeah, you already gave him a spoiler, I guess, with the whole 60-40 deal. But see, here's the thing, right? Is that, and I want to break this down as quickly as possible because I want to put it into perspective, right? Because oftentimes what I hear from a lot of my mentees and stuff like that is that, hey, I heard what you said about the 60-40 plan. Yeah, I get it. It makes total sense, but the 75 just looks better and I'm making more money and stuff like that, right? But here's the thing, okay? Put it in terms of numbers, though, like literally in numbers, okay? So let's just say, for instance, we have a vehicle that rents out for, let's use the lease number, $35 a day, right? On the 60-40 plan, one would be realizing $21 a day. On the 75%, plan, and I just want to do this. Let me do this math real quick. On the 75% plan, one would be realizing $26.25, right? And so that's a difference of $5.25, right? And so if we multiply that $5 times 25 cents over the term of a month, right? Over the term of the month, $5.25 times 30 days, okay? It'll be at $157.50, okay? Now we have that math, all right? Let's transition a little bit. Let's look at some possible outcomes of things that can happen while renters are in the vehicle. So there's a thing called accident. Do you know the beauty of the word? Because I'm big on the English language, right? So you know the beauty of the word accident. It lets one know that this circumstance was not planned for. Okay, and so if you can't plan for an accident, the least thing that you can do is protect yourself in the event of an accident. Why is this important? Accidents can happen as a result of someone's negligence, and accidents can happen as a result of Mother Nature, right? In a sense of, I could be riding down the expressway right now, right? Me and you guys in the car, and all of a sudden, big truck passes us, a cement truck passes us, and boom, pops off to the cement truck, a little small pellet, cracks the windshield, okay? All right, so now that windshield is gonna, if it's just a small star, that windshield will cost us $75, right? If it's a major type of deal, that windshield will cost us $150, okay? So they have a thing called a deductible. In the 60 plan, you have no deductible. In the 75 plan, you have a $250 deductible, okay? So what this tells me is that something that's very likely, if my glass were to get 2 chips over the course of a month, right? And I had to replace that glass in full, I'm looking at spending roughly, let's just say $150 a repair. I'm looking at spending $300, right? And so now I've lost $300 on my rental, right? Which, you know, no telling what my bills are regarding that car, no telling what my overhead is regarding that car, right? Or whether I was even depending on this income, right? So I lost $300 because I was chasing $157.50. Okay, even in the stock market, right? That's not a good bet. I don't leverage my money where I could potentially lose $300 to realize $150, right? And so what I'm getting at here is that, you know, the insurance is there to protect you. And for entrepreneurs, we really try to move around predictable revenues, right? Because that's what allows our business to grow. That's what allows us to get a perspective onto what to expect and things like that. But when we add in the element, the variable of accidents, we can no longer bring in those numbers because we don't know what's going to happen there, right? And if we have a $250 deductible each and every time, well, guess what? On these 2 scenarios right here, you're paying that out of pocket. So what if it's a month where you only realized $1,000? Now you're taking $300 from that, and now you got $700 left. Versus a situation where, you know, you wouldn't have realized as much. You would have realized what, 15% less. So let's say $850, but it's an $850 that you were sure of. Okay. Now, outside of just that particular portion, now you have to understand the suite of benefits that are packed inside of that 60 plan. That's what happens again with hosts, right? That aren't so knowledgeable in the space. This is why a lot of them get out. It's because they don't realize where their protection lies. The whole decision to determine whether they would go with the 60 plan or the 75 plan was solely based on money. Solely based on money. It did not take into account all of the other things that come along with it, such as roadside assistance in case the vehicle breaks down, loss of hosting income in case the vehicle is down, right? The monies that's given to you in terms of if you needed to get a rental car because your vehicle is down, right? These are things that add value. So guess what? In this same scenario where we get the cracked glass, we have to repair this glass. Let's just say it takes 1 day to put in the claim, 2 days for them to review the claim, 3 days for them to pay out on the claim, and then the 4th day for you to get the person actually out there, right? It happened 2 times in that month in this particular scenario. Now your vehicle is down for 8 days out of that month. What happens for those 8 days? You cash flow nothing, right? What happens if you have the 60% plan and that situation presents itself? Now you cash flow for those missing days based on the average daily rate that you have. So for those 8 days, I got paid. literally got paid, right? So what would incline me to go with the 75% plan when I don't know exactly what my numbers will look like at the end of the month in the event that something as minute as what we just mentioned happens, or something as major as, you know, getting bumper damage or something like that may happen, right? I think that that's some of the things that operators need to take into consideration when making these decisions, because that's what separates regular hosts from how I like to consider myself an elite level host. And the suites of benefits go well beyond the scope of what I just mentioned there, right? That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? And that's what I'm constantly drilling into my mentees' head, because I understand that there is a lot of unlocked value in there that if you don't pay attention, if you aren't intentional in seeking that out, then you just won't know. Right. And you'll continue to lose value. And in this business, when you lose value in your business, that means that your asset is depreciating even faster than it would normally in a situation. So I hope that just kind of adds some context on exactly. And it's kind of a tip too. Read the dang on insurance policy. Know exactly what you're covered for. Truly understand where you can extract value, because there's not an insurance claim that I get that I don't pocket some money for myself. Right. And it's all about having these ecosystems that help insulate the business surrounding you, right? Not things happening and then you're reactive. We want to be proactive and already have these things in place so we know what our course of actions will be, and we won't have to deal with those kind of those type of nuances that come along with this car share economy in forms like what we just mentioned.
You know what you said right now is a lot of new investors and even seasoned investors don't put money aside for certain things. They don't think about those types of issues. They don't put money aside for taxes. An intelligent investor will do that. And whether that's a car, real estate, you know, you got to hope for sunshine and prepare for rain. Like that's what at the end of the day, what you have to do. And I think a lot of times I fell into this myself, you know, with taxes and dumb stuff that I just didn't realize because I just wanted to make the extra $5. But then when that rain happens and you're sitting there without an umbrella and you're just like, shit, what am I going to do now? That's when you finally decide. It kind of takes those situations to happen for you, to happen to you, to happen for you, so that you eventually start to, like, you know, learn what you got to do. And that's why having somebody like you as a mentor to be like, hey man, like you need to think about these things. Here's a scenario. Here's a situation. This happened to me. And you change your perspective on how you're investing and how you put money aside, you know, whether it's real estate, you're putting cost things aside, whether you have a vehicle, you're putting, you know, let's just say $50 aside just in case something happens, you need to get something fixed. Those are things you have to do when you're investing. So I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times, you know, investors just don't do that. Again, it's like it's a learned behavior. You know, you got to learn how to take the fall and then stand back up. But you know what, man, how does somebody get started then? Like what's the easiest way for somebody to get into Turo, get into this business? And they shouldn't go buy a Tesla like I did, or buy an A3 like Rafa, or not an A5. You know, what would you say is the easiest way for somebody to get in, and what they need to look for?
So what I always encourage individuals to do when getting into this space, right, is to once again get away and block out all of the noise that's out there, right? All of the things that tell you need to have all these supercars, all these great cars, and all these deals, right? The whole romanticizing you inside of this, you know, this new Maserati truck, right? You got to eliminate that, because that adds no value to your business, right? But instead, we need to focus all of our energy in situations where we become better at what we're trying to do, right? We continue to engulf ourselves in the knowledge that's surrounding the space, which leads me to, not that the Tesla or the Audi are bad cars to get, right? But that's not the cars we want to start with. And the reason why is because, right, cars are machines. Cars are made, contrary to popular belief, cars are made to break down. Why? It keeps the world going, right? The dealerships, the service centers wouldn't be open. The recall centers wouldn't be open. Nothing would be open, right, if the cars wasn't breaking down. It's called job security, okay? So as long as they need job security, there will be things wrong with these vehicles, okay? And so your job as an investor is to mitigate all of those costs, right? Minimize all of those costs that are involved with this business, right, while you're learning, because you don't know what you don't know. So do I want to learn a lesson about my bumper on Rafa's brand new Audi A5? Or do I want to learn a lesson about insurance with Rafa's 2010 Honda Accord, right? I'm going to say I want to do that with Rafa's 2010 Honda Accord. Why? Because even if I lose, right? Even if I've done everything contrary to everything that I've said today, right? My cost for repairing to restore the vehicle is going to be significantly lower than that Audi A5, right? And so, but see, the beauty of it is that the same lesson was learned, right? The same lesson was learned, but at a fraction of the cost. A lot of times, investors get inside of this business, the car sustains some sort of injury, some sort of damage. They haven't even made enough money to get it fixed, right? So now that the whole business is underwater before they've even got started, now what happens? It now leads to a sour taste in their mouth. When you have a sour taste in your mouth about a business, only one thing follows that, right? You lack attention to detail now. Why? Because now you're disengaging from the business. Why? Because it's not profiting you any. So now I'm not focused on the cars. I'm going back to whatever I was doing before I even heard about this cars, and I'm probably, swearing on the name of Rafa, Leo, and Jesse now as a result of the things that I've done inside of my business that were not effective, right? And so I say start with the older vehicle because those costs will be lower, but you also want to find an older, reliable vehicle, right? And it was one of the things that I explained to Rafa, even when he was trying to get his vehicles, right? It was that, there's nothing wrong with the vehicles that you got. Superb, great vehicles. Right now, we need to worry about the nucleus of your fleet, right? Stabilizing that so you can really start to understand where your profits will be month in and month out. And then as we understand that, we understand our systems, we perfect our systems. Now we start coming to paint around the fleet. Yeah, you know what? I did want the Audi. Hey, you know what? I did want that Porsche. I'm going to add that in. But we're constantly being supported by the nucleus of the business that not only solidified our earnings, but also taught us invaluable lessons, right? Because I could preach all day and give you a million scenarios, but there's still another million scenarios that I probably hadn't even touched on because the question wasn't asked in that particular context, right? And so you're really learning these things. And then now as you continue to grow and expand, whether it be you doubling down in the more affordable cars or whether you're getting, luxury cars, supercars, and all those deals, now you're in a situation where you're still applying those same things that you learned with those other cars to those, so you don't have those problems. Because I don't lose at this point. I can't lose. If I do, it's negligence of one of the people that I have with me, right? And then that calls for some sort of meeting because 9 times out of 10 we've already touched on that subject somewhere throughout the training. Dude,
I love that. And one of the biggest thing is because you've already gone through those issues, right? I always tell people, people always ask me like, hey, what should I do to get started? Man, just go on and get started because I can answer whatever questions you may have, but you're not going to learn those little details until you're actually going. Same thing with the cars, right? Like you're saying now. Yeah, don't go out and buy a brand new 2021, 2022 vehicle in the circumstance where you're buying a high-end luxury vehicle, right? These famous BMWs that everybody wants to drive right now. Everybody thinks, hey, let's get these X6s because they're beautiful. But do you realize how expensive it is to fix one of those things if something like even a little scratch, right? Do you want that to be your first learning lesson? Hell no, man. Right? Yeah, I love that. I love that, Leo. Let me ask you another question here. What was your big break in life or in business or in personal or in entrepreneurship that made you go, this is what I want to do, right? I know we're talking about the car sharing economy, so maybe it could be in the car sharing economy, but what was considering that the show's called A Big Break, we like to ask this. What was your big break? Where did you get that clicking moment?
For sure. So I've always been an entrepreneur in life growing up, right? I'm talking about I'm the kid in middle school selling candy, high school selling candy, selling Gatorades, chips, right? That's me, right? Always feeding that entrepreneurial spirit. And it was good and bad, right? And I understand the both polarities of my situation because now, as I was growing as an entrepreneur, I started to have this lust for money, but not realizing that I didn't need to keep chasing the money, but rather attract the money, right? And so my big break was, I tell you my big break. So I come from very humble beginnings, right? But my big break is that I was in college, I played football, I was on scholarship. And I had one of the worst situations ever happen, right? So long story short, there's this deal where if you tell the residential aide that you got insomnia, you can get your own room, right? You can get your own apartment, right? And of course, I want my own apartment because I want to, enjoy life the way I want to enjoy life. And it backfired, right? It backfired. So not only did it not work, I also ended up homeless for about a week at college, right? And the reason was because I took my name off of the list and didn't sign up for an apartment. They just said, hey, you know what? We'll just give you this money and you go figure it out on your own, right? So here's my big break. So my big break is that I actually knew one of the girls that worked in the res life. She alerted me to an apartment, right, that was vacant and going to be vacant for the entire year. And so I ended up living in that apartment, right, that was not on record. Because I was on scholarship, I ended up getting all of my rooming and boarding money back, right? And so that was the money that I utilized in order to get into my first investment upon graduation. So I took that $10,000 and I opened up what we call an emission station, or some of you all may know it as a smog check place, or I mean, there's different names around, right? And immediately I was able to start cash flowing in there, right? And then I done some things that, was frowned upon. I started fabricating some documents and making the money fast and stuff like that, right? But my big break again was that, okay, I see what I've done. I've seen how I've lusted after money. Now let me put myself in a position where I can attract money. And that's where the automotive side started to really rear its head, right? And I'm praying, and I'm so hopeful for some sort of big break. And literally the big break is when I walked inside of that bank, like I talked about earlier, and the guy alerted me to the rental car industry. And from then on, it's just been an upward trend for me as far as this business was concerned.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Yeah, everybody always has their little tiny little situations that happen and learning curves and all that stuff. So that's awesome, man. So what can somebody do today, Leo? And we know you got to jam out of here. What can somebody do today to apply and learn? Like if they learned through this conversation, what can somebody do today to move forward with, their journey in the Turo business or the car sharing economy?
I think the first thing you have to do is see what you have an abundance of. Do you have an abundance of money, or do you have an abundance of time? Okay. And depending on which one would determine which route. So if you have an abundance of money, go out and find yourself a nice cash car. Because when you really peel back the numbers, and you have to do your own research, when you really peel back the numbers, like dollar for dollar, some of those cars out earn some of your most nice, luxurious cars that are out there, right? Dollar for dollar, though. Okay. And so if you were to deploy that same capital that someone else did into those type of vehicles, more times than not, you would out earn them, right? Or there's a situation where you may have an abundance of time, in which, I like to deploy a lot of creative strategies. And so what are there? There's recognizing that there is an abundance of unused inventory that is out there. And so one of the strategies that I like to share with individuals is just go inside of your local dealership, right? That sales office is usually open sales and service is usually open from about 9 a.m. to about 8 p.m., right? Or 7 p.m., right? And you sit in there, and just as in real estate, where individuals see these bandit signs that are usually stamped in, we buy houses, we buy ugly houses, we would literally repackage that to our liking for this industry. And so it's whether it be, hey, we take your car and rent it. Hey, we buy ugly cars, or hey, we buy your old cars, or hey, we rent your unused vehicles, right? Whatever that looks like for you, getting intentional in that process, you sit down, you draft up a nice poster, you sit down in that dealership and you airdrop that to each and every individual that comes inside of that dealership. And, just say roughly on the hour, 10 people come in and go out. So if you're there for about, 10 hours, then you should see 100 people. If you convert on at least 10 people that at least want to engage in a conversation with you, right? That's about 10 people that you're talking to. If you convert at least 2, now you got yourself a cash flowing business almost immediately, right? But the only way that you can convince someone is to really bury your head inside of this information that's there, right? Bury your head, because what happens when people talk to you about it, they're going to have some of the same questions that you had starting out, right? And you need to be able to answer those questions fluently and articulately, right? And that's what's going to really allow people to trust you and to trust that you know what you're doing in your process, thus giving them the comfort to say, hey, you know what? Here's my keys. Go run your business. I'll take whatever's there, right? Or you may be an individual with time, right? There's a whole recall method that I talk about. finding those vehicles that have major recalls that must be fixed free of charge, right? Mandated by the government, right? It must be fixed free of charge. It is a hazard for that vehicle to be on the road without having those recall repaired, okay? Find individuals that don't know about the recall. It's tons of them. How many people move around and move from address to address and address to address and still have their mother's address listed on their license? Well, guess what? Their mother's address is where that letter's going to go. And so if they don't check, then they don't know, right? And so if you find them on Craigslist or OfferUp and you give them a proposition like, hey, I'll buy this car for $500. It doesn't have a transmission anyway. They'll probably sell you that car because the car is a hunk of junk and it's not doing anything for them, right? And so you get that car with the knowledge that you know, take it to a dealership, immediately the equity is restored back inside of the vehicle, and now you can choose to start your business. Or it may not be the car that you want. Sell that car, realize that instant equity, and go buy a car that you do want, that you would like to run, right? Just different creative strategies that you could deploy in order to really get started in this business, whether you have money or time. Right? But you got to have one of the other. Nobody has no time and no money, or all the money and all the time, right? It just doesn't work hand in hand like that.
Dude, that was great. I love that. I appreciate that. I wish we could go on forever because I want to talk about the deal we just did together, right? For everybody listening, I just bought a bunch of cars off of Leo here. He sourced a bunch of vehicles for me, which is awesome. And maybe we'll have you back on in a year and we can talk about how they performed and we can go into details because I'm really excited to get this going. But, how just to end it here, man, like, how can people get a hold of you if someone else wants to buy 5 cars from you or they want to learn? Because I know you teach this stuff now, right? Give us the best way to get a hold of you.
So you can go to presidentleo.com. Presidentleo.com. You'll see my number there. So you'll be able to shoot me a text about that, and definitely will get back to you as soon as possible. If you're interested in some of the course material that we provide, which, I like to call it more coaching material that we provide, that too will be on presidentleo.com, and you'll just click on the top left-hand link. That is the Wealth on Wheels Performance Plan. There you'll see a list of options based on where you may be at in your particular journey. Maybe, your first involvement in this business is just hearing it here on the Big Break podcast, right? So maybe you may want to check out, the training webinar that I have to give you everything laid out that you would want to consider. Or maybe you're a seasoned vet, been in the business for about a year and really trying to figure out how do you drive your revenue up, right? We have fully immersive coaching classes where we really work with you one-on-one or in a group setting based on how you choose, where we really go through some of these elite level operator tactics that have allowed me to cash flow insane amounts with cars that cost, $5,000-$10,000, right? I mean, I have some of those cars that can realize $2,000 a month. And so when I hear people like Rafa, for instance, talk about the 1,400 he made with the Audi, I'm like, well, hey, there's been times that I've done that same amount, right, with a car. Not even a quarter is nice, right? But it's just all about understanding the business and understanding your strategy and just being very, very intentional.
Yeah, there it is, folks. So President Leo just basically says, don't buy the Porsche, buy a 2010 Honda Civic, and change your address from your mother's house to your own, wherever you're living now.
Hilarious.
Hey, you know what, man? I still have the address of my mother's house, and I'm gonna be 40, bro. I'm putting a note right now that
this guy owns like 8 houses, Leo.
It happens to us all, man.
I still have that. You know what? I'm gonna show you guys my license in 2 weeks, and I'm gonna have my new address where I'm at now. All right, so it's not gonna go to my mom's house anymore.
There you go. Hilarious, man.
Oh, man. Well, Leo, dude, thank you for being on, man. I really appreciate it. And guys, the info we'll put it in the show notes as well, along with your Instagram handle. I know you're dropping some good content there as well. But yeah, man, thank you for being here. Really, really, really appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation.
Yeah,
for sure. I appreciate you all, man. And look forward to doing this again with you fellas.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you. Show notes will show President Leo's information. If you guys can please like and subscribe this will help the algorithm get us higher ranking in these podcast notes and all that stuff. So appreciate you. Appreciate Leo, Rafa. Peace, guys.
Peace.
I'm going to the DMV now.